Welcome to How to Write Good. I am your host, Daniel Poppy. You can find out more about me at danielpoppy.com. My last name is spelled Poppie, and it's not a pseudonym. So stalk me, I guess, online. Really unfortunate. Besides that, what was I going to say? You can check out my book on Amazon, The Ninth Hour, and you can get it in a digital format, or you can get it in a physical format. Some of you, if anybody ever listens and you want a physical copy of my book, please reach out to me. A signed copy of my book. Please reach out to me on social media. I don't want you to demean those who like signed copies of things and like collecting things they love. Okay, I'm not a big fan of things, and I'm not trying to demean fans. I actually, honestly, if my writing ever takes off, the fans will have made my career, right? People who like my work. So I don't want to demean fans, but I'm not someone who is a big, huge fan who freaks out over stuff. There's certain things I like a lot, but I'm not really a fan of something. And I want to maybe change that. But if you want a signed copy, I don't get it, but I will get you a signed copy of my book, especially me. I don't know why you want a signed copy of my book as opposed to anybody else's. I don't get that. You can check out that book on Amazon, though, The Ninth Hour, if you want to. Digital or a physical copy. Or you can check out, if you don't want to pay any money, you can check out One Last Toast for Ebenezer Fleet, which is my serialized novel that comes out in a digital format on my website and in a audio format on this podcast and its own podcast. So if you don't like this podcast and you're like, yeah, I don't really like his stuff, you can always check out that which is a narrative. It's a story. And you still have to listen to my voice, which is really unfortunate, but at the same time, you get to listen to my writing. My writing is much better than my voice. If only my voice was as good as my writing. I guess I think highly of my writing. All right, we are going to jump right into everything. I've got a few announcements at the end of this episode, but we're going to jump into what's going on. So the word of the week is, and we have no logical fallacy right now because I've run out of them. The word of the week is portmanteau, or actually you say it portmanteau. So a portmanteau is a large trunk or suitcase. Now, there's another meaning of this. When you take two words and you blend the sounds of the words and you create a new word with a slightly different meaning. So, for example, brunch is a meal between breakfast and lunch that blends lunch and breakfast. Now, honestly, does anybody really think brunch is a thing? Brunch isn't a thing. What brunch is a late breakfast. I guess you could eat it at lunchtime, but it's essentially a late breakfast. It's not really, you're not really eating anything. Another word that happens to be a portmanteau word is motel, actually, of all things. So motel, if you're not aware of this, is actually a blending of motor and hotel, which I think it usually is the case that these are hotels, because it's been around so long that it's kind of part of the language. You don't even think about it. But motel, I think, is a hotel that's on the road. So it's a hotel that you stay in after you've been driving. So here's a few other ones that I'm running into. Bionic is biology and electronic. Bodacious, I didn't even know that was a portmanteau word, is bold and audacious. Bollywood is Bombay and Hollywood. Bromance, brother and romance. Bro and romance. Carjack is actually a portmanteau word. I think you say the T in it, I believe. It's car and hijack. Let's see if we have any more. Chillax, Chinglish. This kind of sounds a little racially insensitive. Chocoholic, chortle, which is chuckle and snort, which is a very descriptive way to say how somebody laughed, honestly. Crunk, crazy and drunk. I didn't really know that was a thing. Oh, cyborg is one. Cybernetic and organism. So all these are portmanteau words. Dumbfound is one as well. So I'm just running into these. I'm a big fan of language, if you can't tell. And I think things like these are fun. And these are things that they kind of spring up naturally out of the language, and people make them up and stuff like that. But I'm just a fan. I'm just a fan of that. My wife and I were talking yesterday. No, it was yesterday, I believe. We were driving in the car, and I guess I had bad breath. And she was like, "Oh, your out breath was so bad." And I'm like, the word we use in English, dear, because I call her dear, the word we use in English is exhale. And she's like, yeah, you're right. It's an exhale. I just couldn't think of it. I just kind of talk. But what I said is, I'm like, you know what? I bet you out breath is the literal translation from the German. And we actually checked it out, and it's pretty much the literal translation from the German, because German is kind of like that. It's very literal in a way for how they create words. So fun stuff. Portmanteau word, two words that you slam together and it creates a new meaning. Okay, so this week, I think I've already talked about this in the past, but I was doing some work on another project I'm looking into doing that's going to be coming out soon, that you'll be able to check out soon on my website and other areas on the web. But I was doing some work, and part of my work that I was doing, I was looking into what art is, okay? I was looking into what art is, and I know I've already talked about this a lot, but I just took some more time to think about it and think about what it is, and maybe how it affects us and why it affects us in that way. I've already said in the past that I do not think everything is art, and I do not think everything is good art that is classified as art. Not everything that is classified as art is good art. In the same way, like I talked about last week or the week before, not everything that is considered a chair is a good chair. Not everything that is considered a good pen is a good pen. There are certainly many bad pens that are created. I've run into a lot. They're really frustrating. There's not every coffee is good coffee. That's more subjective, though. Maybe we can get a bit more objective. It's easiest to say that something isn't good when it actually is physical, like I've talked about before. If a chair breaks apart when you sit on it, it's not a good chair no matter how good it looks. Okay? If a bed breaks when you lay on it, no matter how good it looks, it's not a good bed. If a bed has a big, huge spike that comes up into your back, it's not a good bed, because it's going to be poking a hole in your back and probably killing you. If a light doesn't work, if you have a lamp and the lamp doesn't work at all, you plug it into the wall, you put a light bulb in it, you turn it on, it doesn't work whatsoever, and it's the lamp's fault. It's a bad lamp. Now, if it might be a lemon, a lamp that just doesn't work, it's a fluke that it doesn't work. But if every single lamp that's created in that specific way does not work, it's not a good lamp. You can call it a lamp, it looks like a lamp, but it's not a good lamp. It's not serving the function of a lamp. Things with functions, things with clearly defined functions, are easy to say whether they're good or bad, because if they don't work, if a car doesn't run at all, like, you design this car, if the engineer goes out, they design a car, it gets put together in a factory and it doesn't run at all, it never runs, the car isn't serving its function of actually being capable of running, getting you from point A to point B, because the basic function of a car is to actually drive you around, right? Now, cars can look cool, but if the car looks cool and it doesn't do anything, if it isn't capable of running, there's no interest in it, right? I think that I'm not a gearhead. Is that a pejorative? I'm not a gearhead. I'm not someone who is really into vehicles. I'm not really into mechanics. I think they're interesting. I think they are unbelievable in some cases. But if a car doesn't run, and you're someone who is really into mechanics, if you're really into how that piece of machinery is put together, it's not interesting unless it's capable of firing up. And with so many things in life, we say, oh, well, this is good because I say it's good. And I think that this idea of things being good or bad, I think that in the same manner that a vehicle is good or bad, in this functional manner, it also extends to art. Okay? I think that it extends to art, and I want to talk about that today. But I think I want to first touch on what art is. So, like I said before, I was just going through some work on something else, and I just had to go through this process of thinking through what art is. Now, one thing that we run into in our day and age is saying that entertainment is art, which is not true. Because if I find one example where something entertaining, some form of entertainment, is not art, I've disproven the fact that entertainment is art. Because if entertainment is art, we've got a big circle that is art, and then there is a little circle inside that big circle somewhere that is entertainment. If all entertainment is art. Now, is all art entertaining? We can ask that question. I'm not sure all art is entertaining. I'm not sure. Is all art pleasurable? I'm not sure. I don't know if I can answer that question. Is all art something? We're getting a little too far ahead of ourselves, but maybe with saying entertainment in art and maybe with saying pleasure in art, there's crossover, and maybe there's a lot of crossover. Maybe the entertainment circle, maybe the art circle has most of itself within the entertainment circle, but there's a chunk of it on the outside. But it's not the case that. If you heard that, I'm sorry. If it's not the case that entertainment is art, okay? Art can be entertaining. It almost certainly always is entertaining, but entertainment is not art. Every single form of entertainment is not art. Now, to prove my point, would you consider fishing art? Now, there can be instances of fishing which I might consider artistic. Or there may be instances of creating fishing rods that are creating something that is art. Maybe a fishing rod is art. Maybe a specific, what do you call it? Way in which you fish, a specific technique is art. But the actual act of fishing, I would say, is not art. And I think most people would agree with me that the actual act of fishing is not art. Talking to people is not art. Okay? Now, some people probably want to push this into being art, but in some cases talking is very functional. It's just very basic. It's not artistic whatsoever. It's trying to get one concept across to somebody else. If you ever read a scientific paper, scientific papers in large part are the furthest thing from art on the face of the earth. So if you've ever read a scientific paper, they're very bland, they're very formulaic. I have a friend he majored in music, and he always had this idea that science was very cold. And he's like, yeah, we had a science hall at college, and he would say, yeah, the science hall is so cold and it's so rigid and whatever. He had this view that science and the sciences are very cold and rigid, which in a lot of ways they are, because science is a very rigid formula for arriving at truth and ideas, right? There's a specific way of going about things. You can't vary in the way you go about things. You have to follow very specific rules, and you have to take care to take into account every little piece of everything when you're making it. And I think most people would agree that art is not so rigid. Most people would agree that art has rules, but most people would agree that art is not cold, art is not rigid. Where science might be as completely boring, art is likely to elicit a strong emotional response if done well. So talking or communicating is not art, but I think it can be art, and I think most people would agree with me. In the same way, fishing can be art, talking can be art. Eating is not art. The food might be art, right? But eating is not art. And I think we can agree with that. The act of eating is very pleasurable and entertaining. I find much entertainment. I love eating. I think most people love eating. But I think most people would agree, you're not being artistic at all. When you eat, you're just shoveling food into your face, and you're like, yeah, that's really good. Yeah, that's tasty. I like that stuff. So if you don't agree with me on the first two, that fishing is not art and talking is not art, I think you can at least agree with me that eating is not art. One thing that we do know is that I think that one thing we do know is art is something created. Art is something that people make. Or maybe you can even extend this to something else. Maybe you can say that gorillas make art, or elephants, dogs in some capacity. But I think that even if we say that art is not necessarily something humans make, which I would disagree with, I think that we can say that art is something created. And I would say that art is created by humans. And since I think that art is exclusively created by humans, I don't think that there's a reason why I think art is exclusively created by humans. I do not think that I think that really small children have difficulty making anything good in art, and I'll also explain that as well. But art is created by humans because I believe art is created from the experience of a mind. So a mind creates art. Art is created from an experience of that mind. Not all things created fall into the category of art. I don't think it's the case that all things created fall into the category of art. Now, one of the reasons I think all things created do not fall into the category of art is that if everything a person made fell into this category, then absolutely everything would be art, and there's no point in having this word. There's no point in having the concept of art if everything is art. All that we can actually, instead of saying art, if everything is art, if absolutely everything that has been created by a person is art, then what we can say is that, first of all, the sticky notes on my desk are art, right? The pieces of paper are art. These things have been created by people. In some cases, these things have been created by machines that create them. So the machines create the thing, but the thing is created by a person. I mean, the machine is created by a person, and the thing creates the paper, the sticky notes. But I think that even things that are created by hand, I don't think that everything created by hand is art. If I create a very basic chair, like I've talked about before, I don't think that necessarily is classified as art, especially if I don't have the intention to make it art. Okay? If I'm like, hey, I need a chair, I need something to sit on. So what I'm going to do is I am going to I could probably take 6, 7, 8 pieces of wood, cut them up, put them together in some form that's going to allow me to sit on it. And it's going to hold my weight, and it's going to be functional as a chair. But it's going to be really, really ugly. It's going to serve no purpose. It's not going to be, the only purpose it's going to serve is to be a chair. There's no other reason I'm making that. I'm not putting any effort into it to make it look pretty or anything like that. So I think that not everything people make is art. Now the thing about it too is there's so many things in existence that people make that I think fall into the classification of being art. But I think you have to split it up in this way. Now, if I make a chair, and I make a really basic chair, I don't consider that art. But as soon as I start to stylize that chair, I think I might classify that as art, and or at the very least artistic. Okay, and there's a very specific reason why I think that that would be the case, that this chair that's very basic and functional, and it has no extras on it, is not classified as art. That's not classified as art, but I think the reason why, there's a very clear reason in my mind right now why that chair that has extra frills, that is beautiful, is considered art, because it goes beyond just that function. And that's the whole point of what I'm talking about. What is being created goes beyond mere function. And that's why things that are mass-produced, in a lot of cases, they don't go beyond the function. Maybe they go very minimally beyond the function, but barely. Like, I've got notebooks that just serve the function of me being able to write. I might make art in the notebooks, but at the same time, those notebooks just serve a very basic function. They don't look pretty. They're the cheapest notebooks I can buy, because why write with my ugly handwriting on super expensive notebooks when cheap notebooks do well and cheap notebooks stay together? But they're not art. Another thing I think we can talk about with art, another aspect of art that I think people that we need to tease out, that I thought needed to be teased out, was that if you look at art from a utilitarian perspective, from the function of a thing, from what we need. So, for example, we need food, we need water, we need shelter. Otherwise, we're going to die. To survive in this world, we need specific things. To do specific things in this world, we need specific tools, or we need specific knowledge, or different things like that. But if you look at art from a utilitarian perspective, that art does not need to exist. If you look at art from a utilitarian perspective, art is something extra added onto life. Like I was saying before, if I make a basic chair, I wouldn't consider that art, but as soon as I add something onto that chair that doesn't need to exist, that might fall into art. And I'm not saying this for certain, because it's very hard to define art. And if you've noticed, a lot of what I've done to define art has been going outside of art. It's been going around. It's outlining art, as opposed to saying this is exactly what it is, which I'm going to say exactly what I think it is. But at the same time, there is, when I talk about things that are like this, it's very difficult to say exactly what something is, and you're always guessing to a certain degree. You're always just trying to tease out what something is, and I think that's the beauty of one of the beauties of art is that it goes beyond our comprehension. If you look at the basics, basics of what is needed in life, if you look at the outward appearance, you'll say that art is unneeded, right? But every culture has art. That's the weird thing about it. It goes beyond what we can understand. It goes beyond what we say, what we need, right? It goes beyond what we think we need. But at the same time, every culture has created some form of art. They've created this unneeded thing. I'm putting it in quotes. My best understanding of art currently is a meaningful and creative expression of our understanding of art, of life that goes beyond the physical. Let me just say that again, and I'm gonna make it more succinct. My best understanding of art currently is a meaningful and creative expression of our understanding of life that goes beyond the physical. We can think of this in other more succinct terms as well. Art is the meaningful and creative expression of the metaphysical. Art is the meaningful and creative expression of the metaphysical. So there's a few different pieces to that I just want to break down. We definitely need the creative aspect in art. We definitely need the creative aspect. And I think most people would agree that we need that as something created. Even people who I think have very bad theories on art still maintain the idea that art is something created, because there's these artists that I think are poor artists because of ideas, because of their paradigms, because of that bedrock idea that they're building off of. They create really bad art. They might be really, really good at creating art, but because of that idea, they're creating bad art. For example, I always go back to this. There are people who do this. They swallow paint, they puke paint out on canvas. That is bad art. Okay? That is bad art. It is something created, right? You're creating that. At the same time, it doesn't really fall into something that I would consider good art. It doesn't take skill, first of all. At the same time, I don't think it falls into that piece that is meaningful. I think that art needs to be meaningful. And some of you might be saying, well, there's a lot of stuff that's created that I would consider art that isn't meaningful. But I think you've missed the point with what art is. I think you missed the point on how the meaning is conveyed. When we write something out, when we decide to write out our philosophy, which I'm sure every single person has done, when we decide to write out our philosophy, we are using words to write out that philosophy. We are using very specific concept. We are using very specific words to convey very specific concepts, to convey that meaning of what we believe to somebody else, right? With science, when we want to say we are studying something, or we want to say we have supported a specific theory, we say it in as specific words as possible, or we should say it in as specific words as possible. The issue with life, and this is where art comes in too, the issue with life is that life goes beyond what we're capable of understanding. And it's probably the case that it goes beyond what we're capable of understanding because we are trying to understand ourselves, right? Because life is very much consists of who we are and how we act and think and feel. All these different pieces that make up being human. So art doesn't say things in a succinct, clear way because of the fact that I don't think it's capable of taking all these pieces of what it is to be human and saying it in a succinct and clear way. Art, as it is understood by the majority of people, is something that allows us to feel something different, allows us to experience something different. It conveys a meaning, but it doesn't convey a meaning with specific words, right? So those people who are making art that I consider poor, bad art, what they are doing, they are trying to convey a meaning by eliciting a specific response in some cases through vomiting on a canvas. Now, I think that in a lot of these cases, it goes back to this Duchamp. So Duchamp, I talked about him before. He was a abstract artist, I think you would call him, and he was a sculptor, I guess, in some cases. And he took a urinal and he flipped a urinal on its back so that the trough was facing upward, and he said it was called the fountain. And what he was saying, what he was trying to convey to people, he was trying to ask the question, what is art? Now, back in his day, there was more of a set in stone view of art. An artist trying to always break out and push the boundaries. So what he was doing was he was pushing the boundaries. But what has happened in our culture is our culture has actually taken his ideas and made it doctrine for art. So when you do something like puke on canvas or do something that is that will elicit a response, making people say, "Oh, that's stupid. Why the heck would you do that? Oh, that's ugly." When you do that, you're actually doing something that is falling into the doctrine, today's doctrine of what art is. Not everybody believes that you should make ugly art. Not everybody believes that you should just make art to push the limits. Not everybody believes that you should make art to offend people. Some people, I think a majority of people actually believe art should be beautiful. Art should convey this human experience. Art should elicit emotions in us that make us transcend our humanly experience. Even if you don't believe in any afterlife, even if you don't believe anything beyond this life, I think you do believe in this transcendent feeling of being human, because you probably have experienced it in some point. If you have ever been exhilarated, if you've ever found a piece of art, found a piece of music that's just grabbed you, and a piece of music that's taken you somewhere else, even though you're still in your body, it's a form of transcendence, right? It's that feeling of transcendence, and not every piece of art makes you feel great. Some pieces of art make you sad. Some pieces of art take you on a journey and leave you emotionally exhausted at the end. But the point I'm trying to make is that art isn't just function. Art isn't just us communicating specific words. Art is actually bringing people into an experience, bringing people into the human experience, and trying to make them understand the human experience. And the different facets of the human experience, because there's 7 billion people on Earth, and I bet there's people whose experiences match. There's people whose experiences are very similar, but there's 7 billion people in 7 billion different situations that are probably all different, and everybody's situation is different, and everybody's going to have a different way they experience that humanity, I think. You're experiencing a sliver of what it is to be human. You're experiencing a lot of what it is to be human, but at the same time, there's so much more that you don't know. There's so much to the world. There's so much to humanity that you just can't see because you're incapable of seeing it. But what art does is art allows us to almost take, and this is the same thing what I've talked about with writing again and again and again. Art allows us to take on the thoughts of another person in some capacity and relive those thoughts within the experience that they experience them, if they're a good artist, right? So if you see a painting and that artist has done their job well, and that artist is a skilled artist, they've taken that painting and they've created it in a way where you're going to re-experience what they experienced. I think music is one area where we really understand this, because music, when we hear specific types of music, we know whether it's sad, we know whether it's happy, we know whether it's upbeat, we know that whether the musician is singing in an excited way. We actually, in some cases, the music itself is upbeat and the lyrics are depressing. So we have this dissonance within us between the lyrics and the music itself. And music especially does this, and people understand that music allows us to take on the emotions of that musician, of that artist, after that musician has done it. And the musician has specifically written that music. Maybe they wrote that music because they were going through that difficult time, but that truthful expression of what they're going through allowed other people to experience what they were going through in a similar fashion. And if they were extremely skilled in their craft, and it's not just, you have to have a specific level of being able to do something. If you want to create music, you have to be able to make music, right? You have to have a capacity to make music. There are other skills that you can have within life that allow you to be better at art. If you are empathetic with people, if you are someone who is able to reflect deeply on him or herself, you're going to be able to create a specific type of art that other people weren't. If you're able to look at a situation and you're able to like see how all the little pieces fit in that social situation, is what I mean, you might be able to write social situations in a story in a way that are very real, that are allowing that person to see exactly what is happening as you have seen what is happening. And I think that's really cool. And I think that's the point. I think that's what we're trying to get to within art. It is something that is meaningful, right? We're trying to convey a meaning. We're trying to convey this meaning, this human experience, but we can't convey it just by saying specific words. We can't even convey it just by writing, hey, this is good, this is bad. We actually have to walk a person through this experience with whatever art we're creating. This is why when you ask an author what their book is about, it might be difficult for that author to actually convey what that book is about, because from what I see, human experience goes beyond our capacity to actually explain it with words in a way that is satisfying. So it's meaningful. It's a meaningful and creative expression of the metaphysical. Now, you might disagree with this definition. This is a definition that I'm going to be playing around with. I'm always trying to think of what things actually are. One thing I always have on my mind, almost always have on my mind, is what is art? How does art work? How does writing work best? Because writing is my little tiny sliver of art. So it's a meaningful and creative expression of the metaphysical. And I think specifically in art, we aren't just describing physical things. You can certainly describe physical things, but you're not just trying to convey how something looks. You're trying to get to the core of the experience of that thing. So if you're a writer, this happens with some writers. Some writers do this. They will describe every tiny little detail of every little thing. So if there's food, they'll describe all the food. They'll describe every single person in the room. And the issue with that is that people don't actually see every little detail of what they're experiencing. The person who is writing in that way, they're not writing to allow that person to experience something. They're writing to be accurate. And you do have to be accurate in how you write. So, for example, if you create a story and the story doesn't follow its own rules, you're not being accurate within that story. If you create a story that is supposed to follow the rules of the real world and you do something that is beyond the pale, then you are going to be writing in an inaccurate manner. But you don't have to have every little detail. You don't have to be photorealistic when you're writing. You have to be believable. You have to take... So, when Nintendo... I'm a big fan of Nintendo's... I'm a big fan of Nintendo. And the reason why I am is because they are very creative and they're risk takers when they create things. Because they had all the motion controls and there were some consoles, some video game consoles dealing with motion controls, but Nintendo dove right into it and they're always trying new things. They're always trying to see what they can do and see what they can change to make things better and make things more fun. And one thing that I can't remember which game it was, but there was a Nintendo development team, and they were creating a game. And when they were creating the game, the person in charge of the game said, "Hey, we are trying to create reality, not realism." And that's, I think, the point that I'm trying to make right here too. When you create any form of art, you are not going for realism. You're not trying to carbon copy everything that you see or hear or feel. You are going for reality. You are trying to allow that person to experience it in a way that they're going to be like, yeah, this just sucked me in. And I was going on that journey with the main character. Or, I think it applies in the same way to music. There's some music that might go through the steps of making you sad. Right? And it might do a good job of it. But there's some music that really grabs you. And it's like, yeah, this is a part of life. This is a piece of life that they've really conveyed what it's like through how they've, not just through the music, but how they even have sung the lyrics, right? This happens with painting too. The reason why we don't always have realism in painting is because people don't always experience what they see in the same way. They're trying to convey that experience. That's why you're not going for realism. You're not trying to get every little tiny detail correct. You're not trying to explain every little detail when you write or create art. What you're trying to do is you're trying to get that person, it's a difficult task. It's a really difficult task. You're somehow trying to get that person to understand the experience that's going on in your head, or the experience that you're ginning up within you, that emotion, that narrative, what you're seeing, what you're feeling. I think most writers want the reader to get done with the book and be like, oh my gosh, I want to keep on reading. I wish that didn't end. Or you get done with the book, you're like, oh, that was so sad. Oh man, you feel like you've had a loss yourself. There's certain books that I've read in the past that I've gotten to the end of the book, and I'm like, man, I just need to take a couple days because I'm grieving practically because this writer has done such a good job. So maybe we'll leave it with that. So art is I'm gonna read my thing again. The meaningful and creative expression of the metaphysical. The metaphysical is something that goes beyond the mundane of this world. The metaphysical is the thing that is that meaning behind life that we just can't explain. Maybe we can explain it someday, but we really have a hard time explaining that meaning behind life. We really have a hard time explaining our drive for meaning. It's the meaningful and creative expression of that metaphysical, or you can think of it this way too. It is not realism. It is trying to reach out and convey reality. If you enjoy this podcast and would like to support me more, what I would ask you to do is that you go to iTunes and you leave a 5-star review. That is something that really, really helps me and helps push the podcast out to different people. And it's something that doesn't cost you much time at all. So if you would do that, I would really appreciate that. And I definitely appreciate everyone who listens to this podcast. If you ever listen to this podcast and you have questions or you have topics you would like me to cover, you can send those to me and I'll look them over and I'll see which ones I think I can cover intelligently. And if you just want to reach out for anything at all, you can do that as well. Thanks for your time. My name is Daniel Poppy, and as always, this is How to Write Good.